The planet was on fire and Jace Rena was beginning to suspect it was personal. He skidded down a scree-slick incline, boots kicking up ash and gravel while somewhere behind him a creature the size of a small star cruiser roared in a way that suggested it had very strong opinions about being shot at. His pulse rifle was running low, his comms were dead, and his right shoulder felt like someone had tried to wrench it off and failed halfway through. In short, another Tuesday. He darted behind the half-melted carcass of what had once been a transport shuttle, now fused into the red dirt like a metallic tumor. The wreckage groaned under him as he braced himself, trying to reload without dropping their last 2 plasma cartridges he had left above him. The sky pulsed with intermittent lightning, not weather, not really atmospheric distortion caused by orbital debris, the kind that crackled and snapped through the upper layers like a cosmic frying pan. Jace muttered to himself as he worked, "Come on, baby. Just one more good blast, then we're finding the worst bar in 3 systems and getting disgracefully drunk." A howl echoed again, closer this time. He cursed and flung himself deeper into the wreckage, crawling through a broken hatch half filled with a gelatinous green sludge that smelled like melted copper and sadness. The moment he pulled himself free on the other side, he froze there, standing no more than 10 m away was a girl. She didn't look injured or afraid or even confused, which was remarkable considering the chaos happening around her. She just stood there, barefoot, covered in soot and grime, holding a strange metal sphere the size of a melon against her chest. Her ears were long too, long, curling back slightly in a way that would have screamed not human even without the faint shimmer of light playing off her skin. They stared at each other. The girl tilted her head. Jace tilted his, mimicking her. He broke the silence first. "Hey, don't take this the wrong way, but are you lost, or are you one of those war god holograms that's going to tell me my destiny in rhyming riddles?" She blinked slowly, then took a step toward him. Jace took a cautious step back. "Right, not big on jokes, that's okay, I can work with that. You need a name. I'm going to call you Nia because you look like someone who doesn't mind if I make things up on the fly." Another step, still silent. He noticed now that her feet weren't just bare, they were spotless. Everything else about her was dirty, but her feet were clean as glass. No scorch marks, no cuts, like the ground had politely agreed not to mess with her. Behind them the beast howled again. The girl didn't even flinch. Jace did. He looked over his shoulder, then back at her. "Okay, Nia, here's the deal. You come with me, we try not to die, and if we make it off this garbage fire of a planet, I'll buy you whatever food your species eats." Deal. She blinked again, then to his utter disbelief smiled. It was small, but it was there. Jace took that as consent. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then offered his own. She placed hers in his, and he felt a faint buzz, like touching a force field, warm but definitely unnatural. The beast crashed through a ridge above them, one eye glowing red, claws the length of Jace's body, gouging deep scars into the slope. "Nope," Jace muttered. "Nope, nope, nope." He yanked Nia forward and ran. They zigzagged through twisted metal and rock formations shaped by centuries of tectonic tantrums. He activated his emergency locator. No response. The signal was dead again. He made a mental note to strangle the guy who sold it to him if he ever got off-world. Nia kept pace without complaint, her small hand never loosening from his. The metal orb she carried stayed clutched to her side, glowing faintly now. Jace tried not to think about that when they reached the ridge where he'd parked his escape pod. Assuming the pod had decided to remain in this dimension, Jace skidded to a stop. It was still there, mostly one side looked like it had been gnawed on by a very determined robot. "Okay," he huffed, trying to catch his breath. "Plan slightly modified. New plan. We get inside and hope it still flies. If not, well, I hope you like camping in toxic environments because I left my marshmallows on the Ranger." He glanced at her. She was studying the pod like it was a relic from a museum. Her ears twitched once, then flattened slightly. "That's a bad sign, isn't it?" She didn't answer, but when she lifted her free hand, the orb hovering beside her now like a pet, and waved it toward the pod, the damaged side shivered and began to repair itself. Jace blinked, then rubbed his eyes. The pod didn't return to factory condition or anything that neat, but the holes sealed, the metal smoothed, and even the lights flickered on. Jace stared at her. "Okay, you're either a god, a really advanced maintenance bot in disguise, or I finally snapped and none of this is real. Either way, I'm impressed." She tilted her head again, then made a motion that was unmistakably shooing right. Got it into the pod inside. The systems flickered as if waking from a long nap. He slumped into the pilot's seat while Nia sat beside him, placing the orb on her lap like a security blanket. "You're full of surprises, kid," he muttered. "If I wake up tomorrow with hair growing backwards and speaking fluent nebular, I'm blaming you." The engines winded, the pod lifted below, the beast shrieked in protest as the stars welcomed them back. Jace finally let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He glanced at the girl beside him. "I don't know what you are," he said softly, "but I think I just adopted you." She looked at him and for the first time spoke. "Jay," she said, voice quiet but clear, "I dreamed of you." He nearly choked on his own spit. "Well," he coughed, "that's not ominous at all." She smiled again. Jay stared at the stars ahead, his hand resting lightly near the controls, and tried very hard not to panic because whatever this girl was, wherever she came from, he was suddenly painfully sure his life would never be simple again. The cricket was by all measures a disgrace to modern spacecraft engineering. She was old, patched together with parts from at least four different manufacturers and one extremely suspect pirate scrapyard. And she made a high-pitched whine every time the artificial gravity kicked in, as if she resented having to hold anyone down. Jace liked to think of her as having character, mostly because if he didn't humanize her, he'd have to admit she was one blown capacitor away from becoming cosmic confetti. Nia didn't seem to mind. She'd claimed the rear cot without a word, curled up around her strange floating orb, and proceeded to sleep for 23 hours straight. Jace checked on her every now and then, watching the way her long ears twitched in her dreams, the way her lips moved silently like she was speaking to someone in a language that didn't reach his ears. On the 24th hour she woke, stretched like a cat, and calmly asked where the sanitation unit was. That was the first time he nearly dropped his coffee in 0G. They were 3 systems out from Zers, for the gravity was cooperating again, and Jace was halfway through rebuilding the left engine's cooling manifold with nothing but a protein bar wrapper and a prayer when Nia wandered into the cockpit. "You dream of static," she said without preamble, standing beside his chair with that unnerving calm of hers. Jace blinked. "Static," she nodded solemnly. "Your mind is filled with broken signals and echoes. You hide it behind humor. It's very loud." He set down his tools. "Wow. Okay, that's deep. Are you reading my mind? Because I got to tell you, it's a mess in. They're not responsible for anything you find, especially the part about the cheese planet dream." She tilted her head. "You were afraid. You still are." "Yeah, well, we were nearly eaten by a shrieking Kiju with laser whiskers." "I'd say fear was the appropriate reaction, not that fear." He gave her a long look. "You've got a real gift for ominous statements, kid." She smiled, small, fleeting, then walked over to the viewport and stared out at the stars. The orb hovered beside her, its surface pulsing gently with a rhythm that felt almost like breathing. Jace watched them both for a minute, chewing on the inside of his cheek. He cleared his throat. "So Nia, that your name, or did I just saddle you with an arbitrary human label you'll come to resent later in your interstellar memoir?" She turned her head slightly. "I don't remember my real name, but Nia's soft. It fits well." "Soft is good," Jace said. "Better than something sharp and pointy like Raskata the Star Burner." She blinked. "That was my mother's title." Jace paused. "Right, of course it was." She turned back to their stars. "Do you know where you're going?" He leaned back in the chair and looked at the blinking console. "Not a clue, but I've got a vague heading toward the Allied outpost on Denith 9. Figured we could drop you there, get you registered, maybe find someone who knows what your orb thing is and why it keeps making noises that sound suspiciously like it's judging me." The orb let out a low warble. "See," Jace pointed, "it's doing it again." "That was definitely a snort. It likes you." Nia said. "Well, that's just great. I'm loved by a sentient global. This is exactly how I imagine adulthood." She said nothing, but her eyes twinkled. Then she frowned, head cocking again. "There's something broken in the ship." Jace blinked. "What? How do you?" The lights flickered. The floor shook. Somewhere behind them, the unmistakable sound of a coolant line rupturing filled the air with a hiss and a smell like burned cinnamon. Jace jumped up. "Okay, you might be psychic. I don't even care. Just stay put." He dashed down the corridor past the mesolet, which was mostly a broken dispenser and a crate of nutrient pouches he hadn't dared open since the last one screamed at him. The engine room was a disaster. Steam hissed from every valve and the main power conduit looked like it had been chewed on by a very bored raccoon with plasma teeth. He slapped the emergency seal. Sparks died down the wine lesson by the time he limped back to the cockpit, covered in grease and minor burns. Nia had Rearranged the nav display into something that looked suspiciously more efficient. He squinted at it. Did you just optimize my system? It was inefficient, she said simply. You rearranged the entire interface. It made no sense. Jace threw his hands up. It made sense to me. That is concerning. He couldn't help the snort that escaped. You've got jokes now. Great. My ship has opinions. My passenger is a telepathic engineer with attitude, and I think I just fell in love with the sound of your sarcasm. She blinked, clearly trying to determine if that was a human mating ritual or not. He sat back in the chair, sighing. So you don't remember where you're from? You don't know how your magic space ball works, and you can sense mechanical failures before they happen. Any other cool features I should know about? I once calmed a storm by singing. Of course you did. It was very large and angry, like a toddler with thunder privileges. She nodded. Exactly. He rubbed his temples. Okay, Denith 9 it is. We'll get some answers. Maybe a real mechanic. And I'll see if someone's willing to pay me to babysit an interstellar enigma. Nia gave him a look that was against all odds. Deeply unimpressed, he smiled back. Hey, I saved you from a death beast. I think I've earned the right to be dramatic. She reached out and very gently poked his forehead. Static again with the static, he grumbled, swatting her finger away. That's my brain's defense system. Be grateful you're not getting reruns of terrible sitcoms and childhood trauma. The orb chirped. Nia's eyes widened. It says you're not entirely wrong. Wait, hold up. It talks to me. And it said that. She nodded. It is curious about you. Well, he muttered, leaning back. Join the club. They sat in silence for a while, the cricket purring its way through their void like a cat with indigestion. Jassis glanced at the girl again. She'd gone still, eyes half closed. The orb now orbiting her slowly like a moon. He didn't know what she was or what storm was brewing around them, but the universe had a way of handing him things just broken enough that he couldn't ignore them. And Nia, whatever she was, had complicated written all over her still. He smiled. At least it wasn't boring. Denith 9 was technically an outpost, but it had aspirations of grandeur. The docking tower stretched higher than needed, gleaming with gold-plated vanity that broadcasted, we are a totally legitimate neutral port, and definitely not secretly run by a corporate syndicate. Jace had been here once before, years ago, back when he was still in uniform and under orders not to gamble, drink, or smuggle potentially hostile creatures in his boots. He had broken exactly 2 of those orders, and the third was just bad luck involving a feral Zerat pup and a hole in his sock. He wasn't thrilled to be back, but the cricket needed fuel. Nia needed answers, and he needed a sandwich. Not necessarily in that order. They stepped off the ship together, Nia's floating orb trailing behind her like a shy pet with boundary issues. Jace had insisted she wear something over her more alien features. Long coat, deep hood, minimal talking. It was a look that screamed tiny bounty hunter or mysterious street urchin, depending on the lighting. She hadn't argued she never did. It was starting to make him nervous. Okay, he said, scanning the terminal. Here's the plan. We keep a low profile, find someone who knows what your magic orb of judgment is, and avoid anyone who looks like they are compiling a most wanted list. Nia looked up at him. Is that why you keep avoiding eye contact with the security drones? I do not avoid, I tactically disengage. It's very professional. A customs officer in a lime green exosuit stomped toward them, visor flashing aggressive welcome symbols. Jace held up his ID chip, gave his most charming, definitely not smuggling expression, and waited. The officer scanned it, paused at the blinking red notice, and stared at Jace. You have unpaid fines, the officer droned. Jace coughed. Surely you're mistaken. I always pay my okay. Which ones? Unauthorized atmospheric entry, disruption of transit beacon protocol. Importing meat-based pastries without proper documentation, that last one is a crime now. Highly. Nia tugged on his sleeve. What is a meat-based pastry? Something I miss terribly. The officer narrowed his eyes. You may proceed, but do not attempt to visit the upper commercial decks. Your presence is flagged as mildly disruptive. That's generous, Jace muttered as they moved on. Last time I got extremely disruptive with a sight of chaos. The station was louder than he remembered. Crowds surged through the corridors. Miners from the asteroid belts, trade delegates from backwater systems, and at least one 7-foot insectoid in a pink sequin vest doing cart tricks. Denith 9 had always been a place where the rules bent just enough to accommodate the eccentric and the unlawful, and everyone pretended it was all above board. They passed a shop Selling antique cryo-weapons guaranteed to freeze enemies or your money back. Stall hawking mood-sensitive clothing, it changes color and judges your life choices. And a back alley cyber dock. Offering tentacle removal, discreet and affordable. Jace stopped at the last one. You know, in another life I might have run a place like this. Weird smells, questionable ethics, dramatic lighting. Nia raised an eyebrow. Why dramatic lighting helps with customer confidence. They turned into a quieter corridor lit in pulsing lavender and entered a shop tucked between a noodle bar and a suspiciously silent oxygen farm. The sign read Krell's Curiosities and Forbidden Lore, and it buzzed in a way that suggested the shop itself might be haunted. Inside, the air smelled like ozone and old books, and the walls were lined with tech fragments, ancient data, crystals, and a large glass case labeled, "Do not touch unless you are absolutely certain." A short white being with 4 eyes and far too many rings on his fingers looked up from behind a console. Krell croaked, a military cast-off and a cloaked mystery child. How charming. What can I do for you today? Illicit relic appraisal, unauthorized RE diagnostics, no refunds. Jace nodded. We're looking for information about this. He gestured toward Nia's orb, which floated forward obediently. Krell's eyes widened. 2 of them anyway, the others narrowed. That is not from this side of the galaxy. He murmured, possibly not even from this fold of space. Where did you get it? Jay scratched his head. Rescued it. Well, her from a collapsing outpost on Droke's orb. Came with the package. Krell leaned forward. The energy signature, the harmonic resonance. This is a royal artifact, ancient, hidden, protected by the orb. Chirped once. Krell shut up. Immediately Nia stepped forward. It remembers you, the shopkeeper's skin pad. To a sickly green. I may have seen one before, a long time ago, before your kind vanished. Jace blinked. Vanished? Excuse me, but vanished is not a great word when referring to a species. That's like saying misplaced when you mean evaporated. Nia turned to him. We did not vanish, we hid. Krell nodded vigorously. Yes, hidden, dispersed across their stars after the fall of the Citadel worlds. The royal lines were extinguished. Or so we believe. Jace rubbed his temples. You're telling me this girl is royalty, like space royalty? The orb made a humming noise and Krell's voice dropped. She is more than that. She is the last thread of a woven empire, the blood of the ether line. Nia remained silent. Jace looked at her, suddenly seeing their stillness in a new light, not just calm but trained, like someone who'd spent her life learning how to hold back. Well, he said slowly, that's just perfect. I thought I was picking up a lost kid, not the interstellar version of Cinderella. Nia's expression didn't change, but her fingers curled slightly at her sides. Krell's eyes flicked to her and back. You must be careful. If the wrong people learn who she is, they will not stop. They will burn entire systems to claim her. Jace exhaled long and slow. So I should have left her on the fire planet. The orb buzzed. Krell looked alarmed. It does not appreciate sarcasm. Well, it better get used to it. Jace muttered. They left their shop with more questions than answers and a discreet warning not to speak the name Etherline out loud. Jace led Nia down a narrow hallway toward the lifts, pretending the knot in his stomach was just hunger. Hey, Nia, he said. Yes, do you know how to wield incredible royal power to say stop a galactic war? No. Cool, but I could learn. Jace looked down at her, at the orb floating loyally at her shoulder, and groaned. I need a sandwich. They didn't make it to the sandwich. Jace had just selected their least suspicious-looking vendor on the prominent one, offering something called a multi-S's wrap and promising only a 12% chance of allergic reaction when the orb let out a high-pitched whine and began spinning like a frantic satellite. Nia stopped mid-step, her hood slipping slightly to reveal the edges of her long curved ears, and turned sharply toward the main concourse. Her eyes narrowed. Jace, still clutching a paper tray of questionable protein, followed her gaze. 3 figures moved through the crowd with synchronized menace, tall, armored in matte black plating and glowing faintly at the joints. They looked like someone had crossbred mercenaries with walking espresso machines. The one in the center wore a visor that shifted colors in time with his footfalls: purple, blue, red. Purple, red again. It was unnecessarily dramatic and very effective. Jace sighed. You know, I miss the days when my biggest problem was bad cafeteria food and a grumpy sergeant who thought I snored too loud. Nia's voice was low. They are tracking the orb. The orb beeped indignantly, now bobbing at her shoulder like it wanted to dive into a garbage chute. Jace took a bite of the wrap. Immediately regretted it and tossed it into a nearby recycling pod. Time to go, princess, she frowned. You keep calling me that. Well, it's either that or your glowing orbiness, and I'm not dignifying that one in public. They bolted. Ninth Nine's lower levels were a maze of industrial ducts, half-lit corridors, and doors that had long ago stopped pretending to work. Jace led them down a freight shaft that doubled as a shortcut. An occasional home to highly aggressive maintenance drones. The smell of ion grease and desperation clung to everything behind them. The heavy clang of metal boots echoed closer. They are gaining, Nia said, unbothered. Thanks for the update, Captain Obvious. Got a plan? I could sing. Does that help? Not immediately. He ducked under a hanging conduit, then maybe save the musical number for the encore. The orb zipped ahead, pulsing a bright blue. Jace chased after it, blindly trusting their ancient space relic more than his own gut, which to be fair had just tried to digest something classified as mostly edible. They skidded into a dark chamber filled with towering crates labeled in 14 different languages, one of which appeared to be legally dead. Nia crouched behind a crate and beckoned him down there. Orb-dimmed footsteps approached. Jace held his breath, trying not to think about how his blaster was still on their ship, how the crate he was hiding behind smelled like fermented squid oil, or how one of the armored figures just stopped on the other side. Through a gap he saw them scan the room. Their visor pulsed violet, then it turned blue, then red. They are using heat signatures, he whispered. I knew I should have invested in those invisibility cloaks. You cannot afford socks that match. Don't attack me with the truth right now. The orb vibrated. A low hum filled the room. Suddenly the temperature plummeted. Chase's breath fogged the air. Ice crusted along the crate edge. The mechs froze, literally locked in place by a thin coating of frost that snaked up their armor like curious vines. Nia stood slowly. The orb glowed in sync with her eyes. I thought you said you couldn't do anything with it yet. I didn't say that. I said I could learn. Jay squinted. That was very loyal of you. They ran again before the mechs thawed back up through the service ducts into a corridor filled with stale music and flickering ads for something called Slimy Sips energy drinks. Nia paused at a ventilation panel and pried it open with her fingers. You ever notice, Jace said, crawling in after her, how every alien ventilation system is just the right size for one adult human and a mysterious child with royal secrets? It's a standard feature. Very practical. They emerged in a dim control room overlooking the docking ring. Security monitors displayed static and flashing red warnings, most of which were written in languages Jace didn't speak, though one did appear to be just the word run repeated 87 times. Nia leaned over a console. The ship is still secure. That's the first good news I've heard all day. He tapped a few keys there. Cricket appeared on screen, looking as humble and ugly as ever. A blinking icon showed several armed figures converging on the berth. Okay, he muttered, Les. Good now. Nia rested her hand on the console. The screen fuzzed, then cleared. Then began displaying a complex waveform. What's that? Ship security frequency. I can redirect them. Jace raised an eyebrow. Are you hacking the station? I'm conversing. Right, conversing. Definitely not committing a federal crime there. Waveform shimmered on the monitor. The armed figures abruptly turned the other direction and marched off into a noodle shop. Jace blinked. Wow, I think I'm in love. Nia didn't look up with me or their orb. Undecided, they moved fast, retracing steps through their maintenance deck, skirting the edge of a garbage incinerator and finally reaching the outer rim. The cricket waited just beyond the next blast door. Unfortunately, so did someone else, tall, pale, clad in a deep crimson coat with metallic braids woven into his scalp. The stranger stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes glowed faintly. He smiled like someone who enjoyed being the smartest person in the room, especially just before setting it on fire. He said, the lost child and her unwashed guardian. Jacis groaned. Great, a monologuer. The man inclined his head. I am Commander Vaughn, formerly of the Imperial Order, currently freelance. Cool, can we leave now? I would prefer not. The girl belongs with her own kind. Her own kind being, he gestured airily, those who understand her lineage, her duty, her power, not some backwater scavenger in a rusted death trap. Jace frowned. Hey, I polished that death trap sometimes. Nia stepped forward. I am not going with you. I believe you will eventually. Destiny has a way of enforcing its terms. Jace pulled her behind him. You know, for a guy who says destiny a lot, you're standing awfully close to a loading hatch. Baron smiled again. Do your worst. Jace pressed their Panel behind him, the hatch slammed open, a vacuum wind yanked crates and loose cables into the void. Von held steady, but his coat flapped madly. Jace grabbed Nia, sprinted through the chaos and dove into the cricket. Alarms blared, the ramp sealed, engines hummed to life from their cockpit. Jace watched Von vanish into the station smoke. He slumped into the pilot's seat and exhaled. Well, he said, that went better than expected. The orb pinged a gentle warning. Wait, what do you mean I left the food behind? Nia patted his shoulder solemnly. We'll get another wrap, not if it's 12% death. We won't. The cricket limped through fold space with all the elegance of a drunken jellyfish, its sublight thrusters hiccuping at odd intervals like an old man telling stories no one had asked for. Jace sat in the pilot's seat, chin propped on one hand, watching the stars blur through the curved viewport. His other hand tapped a rhythm on the console, faster than the beat of the ship's own tired systems. Nia sat cross-legged behind him, surrounded by a neat semicircle of tools and components she'd scavenged from the storage lockers. The orb floated above her, occasionally pulsing as she connected something new to its base, an antenna, a crystalline chip, a strand of reactive memory filament that, according to Jace, looked suspiciously like something he'd once used to unclog a drain. You're rebuilding an ancient interstellar relic, he said, squinting at the pile, using parts one originally bought to fix a broken coffee unit. Nia didn't look up. The coffee unit was poorly constructed, the energy regulator melted, which I believe is what makes the coffee strong. She inserted the chip and the orb chirped in what Jace had come to recognize as smug approval. He glanced at the display again. We're coming up on the edge of null space soon. You sure about this lead? Nia nodded. The orb's memories suggest there may be an echo chamber in the drift zone. If I can access the echo, it might show me where the remaining ether lines were hidden. Great, just one little problem. The drift zone is full of sentient debris clouds and physics-breaking anomalies that enjoy giving passing ships existential dread. I thought you'd like a challenge. I like sandwiches and naps and not having my atoms reorganized by spiteful space weather. The orb glowed brighter. Nia tilted her head. It agrees with you. It does not like the drift zone either. Oh, good mutual dread. We're bonding. The ship shuddered as they passed through their final fold gate. Beyond it stretched their drift zone, a celestial mess of glowing wreckage, ancient station husks, and electromagnetic storms that howled in every spectrum. A red planet rotated slowly at the edge of it, ringed by sharp glassy moons and drifting relics that hummed in low frequencies. Jace engaged the dampeners. Well, it's either a haunted junkyard or the universe's worst art installation. Nia stood beside him. This place is old, older than most records. Fantastic, nothing says fun like old secrets and volatile gravity pockets. Their cricket spiraled in, navigating between the debris fields as they neared one of the larger station remnants, a jagged split tower rotating around a broken gravity core. Nia pointed at a glowing structure embedded in its side. It resembled a collapsed cathedral, but the windows flickered like screens and the stone walls seemed to breathe in their vacuum. That's the echo chamber, she said. Jace squinted. It looks like a haunted lung. I need to enter alone. Nope, try again. It won't open if you come with me. Jace leaned back, folding his arms. Let me guess, sacred bloodline only responds to DNA from the royal line. Blar blar, magical space destiny. Nia gave him a look. More or less, he sighed. Fine, but I'm staying within tractor range. If you start glowing, floating, or suddenly speaking in ancient tongues, I'm pulling you out with a cargo hook. She nodded once, then stepped toward the hatch. Jace paused. Hey, she turned. You come back okay? No weird revelations or heroic sacrifices. We're low on supplies and I still owe you a wrap. She smiled. Agreed. The airlock cycled and Nia vanished into the station fragment. Jace stared at the echo chamber on the monitor, watching their way it pulsed like a heartbeat. He muttered to himself, opened a ration bar, and immediately regretted it. Why do all these taste like chalk and betrayal? Inside the echo chamber, Nia stepped through air that buzzed like a memory half remembered. The orb hovered ahead of her, projecting flickering glyphs across the black stone. Each step she took triggered a soft harmonic note like keys on a buried piano. As she reached the center, the orb spiraled upward, expanding into a lattice of light and geometry that spun faster with each beat. A voice echoed. Nia, she flinched. You have awakened the thread. You carry the pulse of the ether. Do you seek the map? Yes, you must offer truth. She hesitated, then said, I ran from who I was. I feared what I could become. I still do. The lights dimmed, a projection formed, stars, lines planets she didn't recognize and a glowing thread connecting them all. It wrapped around one cluster in particular. A system near the edge of mapped space wrapped in storm clouds and warnings there. Last cradle remains there. The others scattered. The orb pulsed one final time. Then collapsed inward, its glow fading to a low steady hum outside. Jace tapped there. Console then paused. Why are we drifting? The display blinked. The crickets. Engines were offline. Something large had locked onto them. He checked the rear camera. A sleek obsidian ship loomed behind them, shaped like a spearhead and silent as death. It bore no visible markings, only a single light on the front pulsing in rhythm with, "Oh come on," he said aloud. "Why is it always rhythm? Can't ancient tech ever just send a polite text message?" The ship powered a beam weapon. He hit the intercom. "Nia, you might want to hustle. We've got uninvited guests and they've brought the intergalactic equivalent of a mood laser." The echo chamber groaned. Lights flared. Nia sprinted back as the station rumbled. Around her debris fell. The orb spun wildly as she reached the exit. A piece of the ceiling collapsed, clipping her shoulder. She stumbled, caught herself, and leapt into the airlock just as their cricket spun toward escape velocity. Jace caught her mid-fall. "Got you." The enemy ship fired. The cricket jerked, whole groaning system screaming. Jace punched the throttle. The drift zone blurred around them as they flew through gravity slingshots past collapsing relics, skimming plasma fields. The other ship pursued with inhuman precision, trailing energy lances and bursts of white heat. "We can't outrun it forever," Jay said then. "Don't," Nia said. He blinked. "That's a concerning attitude." She slid into their co-pilot seat. "Hand over the orb. Let's show them what a haunted space princess can do." The orb glowed hot in Nia's hands, bright enough to cast sharp shadows across the cockpit, humming low like the voice of a sleeping engine dreaming of war. Jace shot her a sidelong glance as he pulled the cricket into a roll, skimming the edge of a ruined satellite field. "So," he said between maneuvers, "exactly what kind of haunted princess trick are we planning to pull here? Preferably one that doesn't end with us becoming a cautionary tale." Nia didn't answer right away. She was focused, jaw clenched. Fingers spread delicately over the orb's surface as if tuning it like an instrument. The enemy ship, sleek, predatory and still inexplicably smuggle-looking, tailed them through the drift zone, matching every twist, every dive as if it were tethered to them by fate and poor luck. "Do you know what ether threading is?" she asked, eyes still locked on the glowing lattice of light between her palms. "No," Jace replied, "but if it's anything like threading a fuel line through a junk compressor, then yes, I absolutely know, and it's a traumatic memory." She offered a half smile. "It's the ability to sense the flow of ancient energy through dimensional seams. The echoes you joked about, they are real. My people used them to build cities on shifting asteroids, to make ships that ran on gravity, to grow forests in vacuum." Jace winced as a plasma bolt scorched past the port wing. "And you're telling me this now because I'm going to open one of those seams, which sounds very safe and not at all like playing hopscotch with reality." She closed her eyes. "Just fly steady." Steady is a relative concept when someone's trying to laser us into soup. He held the ship level as the orb's glow intensified, casting the cockpit in deep shimmering blues outside the viewport. The drift zone's wreckage began to tremble. Bits of twisted metal and glass slowly drifted apart, forming a vortex around them. Then, without warning, a tear appeared ahead, a jagged golden-edged gash in space like a page being ripped open. The enemy ship hesitated. "Now, Nia," shouted Jace. Didn't wait to argue. He gunned the thrusters and aimed the cricket straight at the tear. As they passed through, the universe bent sideways for a heartbeat. Everything was silence. No stars, no light, no motion, just the eerie weight of nothing. Then sound returned in a rush, alarms blaring, their engines groaned. Nia gasping beside him. They were elsewhere, floating in a stretch of space untouched by known maps. The stars too bright, too close, as if their galaxy had been drawn in crayons by someone who had never seen one. A great structure hung ahead of them, a spherical station spinning slowly, covered in spiraling patterns that dance when observed directly. It pulsed faintly like a giant heart on the edge of sleep. Jace blinked. "I take back every complaint I've ever made about space maps. This is worse." Nia stared in awe. "This is their Archihedron, one of the last royal crypts. The orb brought us to it." "Crypt? Did you say crypt? Because that sounds very much like a place where things come alive and try to eat you." She stepped forward, her expression suddenly solemn. "Number, it's a place where the past speaks. I need to Go inside. You always say that just before you do something terrifying. I've never taken you into a cry before. Well, that's true. Congratulations, this is a first. The docking bay opened for them unbidden. The cricket floated in under its own power, as if invited. They disembarked into a chamber lined with crystal pillars and a soft melodic hum that seemed to echo the orb's pulse. Nia walked ahead, calm, composed. Jace followed, trying not to step on anything that looked ceremonial or cursed. A projection flickered into view at the chamber center. A tall woman with the same long ears as Nia, clad in robes that shimmered like sunlight through water. Her face was older, sterner, and her eyes held the kind of sorrow that could bend mountains. Daughter, the projection said. Nia froze. You have come late, it continued. The lines are breaking. The Empire is gone, but you are still there. Threadbearer, Jace whispered. Did she just say threadbearer? Because that sounds like a myth and a sewing term. Had a baby. Nia shot him a look, then turned back to the image. I didn't ask for this. None of us did, the figure replied, but we answered anyway. The orb floated up between them, casting rays into the ceiling. The chamber shifted, walls folding back, light flowing across their floor like water until they stood in a new space, a map room showing star systems, some lit, some dimmed, and one blinking red. The last ether cradle. Nia whispered. It's still intact. Jace leaned in. That's in the varnish shroud, you know. The system that regularly eats scout ships and spits out their bones. She looked at him. Then we'll go. Of course we will, he muttered. What else would we do with our free time? Learn to knit. The chamber dimmed. The projection faded. Their orb lowered gently into Nia's hands, but just before the lights fully receded, a second voice echoed through the chamber, deep, warbled, broken. She is not alone there. Black pulse follows. Jace stiffened. Okay, that one sounds bad. Nia nodded. That's because it is. They returned to the cricket quickly. Outside the arc, their stars shimmered again. Something dark coiled at the edge of the system, a shadow not cast by light but by memory. Hate and time. The enemy ship had not followed, but something worse was coming. Back in the pilot's seat, Jace ran diagnostics, engines holding, shields recharging, sanity questionable. Nia took her place beside him. Will reach the varnish shroud in 2 jumps, and after that she held up the orb. We restore their line or break everything. Trying. Jace sighed. Do I at least get hazard pay for royal escort missions through cosmic death zones? Nia smirked. Number dangerous anomaly we face. He leaned back. Deal, I'm calling the next one. Bob. The varnish shroud loomed like a bruise in space, a slow churning storm of magnetic clouds and fractured dark matter swirling around a single dim star. The light it cast was sluggish, tired, as though the sun itself were considering early retirement. The cricket's hull creaked as it entered the outer ring of the storm, its shields flickering with static and ghost echoes. Jace muttered under his breath and tapped the console like he was trying to wake up a stubborn vending machine. I swear if this place has space whales with a grudge, I'm ejecting myself, he said, adjusting their pitch. No whales, Nia replied, her voice calm. Just an old weapon buried in the bones of a broken world. Are so more like a galactic haunted house. Great. Do we at least get complimentary glow sticks? Nia smiled faintly but said nothing. She held the orb steady, its glow a deep gold, now no longer pulsing wildly but steady, as if it knew the end of its journey was near. They passed deeper into the shroud, and for a moment all external sensors went dead. Blackness wrapped the ship like velvet. Jace didn't breathe. Then light, a ringed planet emerged from the darkness, wrapped in auroras that flickered like silk on water. Floating above its pole was a structure that made both of them sit upright, an impossible spire orbiting slowly, its form shifting subtly like it couldn't decide whether it was built or grown. That's the cradle, Jace asked. It looks like it belongs in a museum curated by dreams. It's the last, Nia said, and the strongest. Wonderful, let's go poke it and see if we get vaporized. As they approached, the spire responded to the orb in Nia's hands. Gates unfolded, petals of metal and light inviting them in. The cricket docked in silence, welcomed like an old friend returning after centuries. Inside the cradle was warm. That was the first thing Jace noticed, not temperature but a feeling, a hum in the bones, like standing near something alive and ancient that hadn't forgotten how to hope. Nia walked ahead of him, regal without trying, every step echoing with purpose. Their halls shifted around her, guiding them forward. You know, Jace said, at some point we should probably talk about the whole princess thing. She glanced at him, amused. What would you like to know? Your Favorite royal scandal? Do you have a secret twin who ran off with a space pirate? Did you once turn a banquet into a laser duel? I did kick a juke into a fountain once. Now that sounds like their kind of monarchy I could get behind. They reached the heart chamber, an enormous space filled with floating threads of light like starlight frozen mid-dance. At its center was a throne, though it didn't resemble a chair so much as a convergence point. Nia stepped forward. The orb floated up from her hands, disintegrating into strands of golden energy that merged with the threads around the chamber. The cradle sang a sound not heard but felt rippled through the chamber, through Jace's chest, as though his atoms were being politely realigned. Nia stood still, eyes closed, her breath steady. The chamber responded across the galaxy. The hidden ether lines blinked back into being. Systems long silent whispered to life. Ancient outposts flickered online in the drift zone. The Archihedron pulsed once and retracted its walls. A fleet of old royal ships stirred in the void, their cores reignited. Somewhere far behind them, the enemy ship that had hunted them from the shadows simply ceased to move. Its systems disarmed by a wave of energy. It had no protection against the black pulse. Starved of its prey, receded back into the rift. It came from, howling into silence, and then it was done. The orb was gone. The thread settled into stillness. Nia opened her eyes and let out a slow breath as though she'd been holding it for 1,000 years. Jace stepped up beside her. So just to be clear, did we just reboot an ancient interstellar civilization, or did I black out and dream a very symbolic tech support call? A little of both, she said softly. The ether lines are awake. The last cradle is restored. My people, if there are any left, they'll hear the signal. Jace nodded slowly. And you? I don't know. She looked down at her hands. The princess they wanted me to be is gone. The world she was meant to rule is dust. Then maybe don't rule it, Jay said. Maybe build something new instead, something that doesn't involve fancy titles or throwing jukes into fountains. I thought you liked that part. One loved that part, but I think I'd like it even more if it didn't involve potential galactic wars. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then without ceremony she reached over and took his hand. They walked back through the cradle together. When they returned to the cricket, it felt smaller, somehow more intimate. The ship's interior hadn't changed, but something had shifted between them, like the gravity had recalibrated, not to mass but to meaning. Jace leaned back into the pilot's seat inside. So what now? Nia sat beside him. Now we find out what's left. You mean of your people? I mean of everything. The lines will awaken more than just beacons. There'll be sleepers, archives, other heirs maybe. He stared ahead. You're sure you want me tagging along? You saved me when I was a child, then you saved me again when you had every reason to run. You made jokes during impossible moments, kept me grounded when the stars threatened to swallow me. You've always been with me, Jace. He scratched his chin. So you're saying I'm hard to get rid of? Extremely. He smiled. Guess I'll keep the seat warm. Then you're stuck with me. The engines hummed to life. The stars beyond the viewport shimmered in that way they always did right before things got interesting. Nia leaned back, gaze fixed on the horizon. Let's see what kind of future we can build. Jace pulled them into the fold stream, grinning as the cricket responded with its usual grumble. No angry jukes, no haunted relics, just one mildly sarcastic pilot in a galactic princess with a destiny complex. Don't forget the bad coffee, she added. He smirked. Wouldn't dream of it.